Every dog owner lives with a specific kind of nightmare. Most often, it features a fast-moving car or an abrupt, devastating illness. My personal nightmare, however, came dressed in a pink floral blouse and wore an expression of smug self-satisfaction. It started with the sharp hiss of a pressurized canister, followed by a yelp of raw pain from Teddy, my service dog, and the biting, chemical scent that filled the air. This was no mere accident. It was a deliberate assault. The perpetrator, our HOA president, was far from finished. That was merely the first shot in a war I had no desire to wage. In the hours that came after, she would escalate her attack from a physical one to a legal one, spinning a tapestry of lies so malevolent that it came with a 24-hour countdown to a death sentence for my closest companion. Her justification for this campaign? She alleged he barked excessively. A single bark, to be exact. She misinterpreted my quiet existence as a sign of weakness and my composed demeanor as cowardice. She was completely unaware that the only thing truly tested that day wasn't my dog's behavior, but my own fiercely restrained willpower not to systematically and utterly destroy her entire life. Allow me to begin at the start. My name is Jack Dalton. The abilities I acquired in a former life have little application here. I once handled dogs capable of locating a bomb in a sandstorm. I was trained to interpret terrain, foresee threats, and recognize the tells in a man's eyes just before he made his move. It was a world defined by precision, discipline, and consequences that were swift and final. Now, my responsibility is Teddy. He is a 100-pound golden retriever whose most perilous mission involves chasing squirrels from the bird feeder. He is my service dog, though that feels like too sterile a description. He is the anchor that prevents me from drifting away. When the noise inside my head, the echoes of that other life, becomes overwhelming, he presses his body firmly against my legs, a steady, living presence that grounds me in the present moment. We moved here seeking tranquility. This small suburban house, with its tidy lawn and white picket fence, was meant to be the end of the line. A peace I had earned, a peace I believed I had secured. But I soon discovered that this particular brand of peace is governed by 1,000-minute regulations. It is a peace upheld not by mutual goodwill, but by constant surveillance and the dread of finding a violation notice affixed to your door. Every lawn is maintained at a uniform length, every trash can is concealed from view, and every mailbox is an approved shade of black. This harmony is meticulously engineered and mercilessly enforced. The architect of this system has a name, Karen Jordan. She was the president of our homeowners association, a position that, in this small kingdom, effectively made her a queen. She would patrol the sidewalks armed with a clipboard and a gaze that could accurately measure a blade of grass from 50 paces. We were already on her radar. A warning that Teddy's water bowl was visible from the street served as our initial introduction to her reign. I recognized then that she wasn't merely a stickler for rules. She was a collector of violations, biding her time for the one that would grant her the power she so desperately craved. Teddy and I were on our customary morning walk. The sun had risen, the sprinklers performed their rhythmic ballet, and for a brief moment, everything was calm. He was on his leash, right at my side, investigating a particularly compelling patch of grass near Mrs. Gable's award-winning roses. Then, a delivery truck backfired farther down the street. The sound was a loud, sharp report, uncomfortably similar to a rifle shot. My shoulders tensed, my breath hitched, and a phantom sensation of desert heat washed over my skin. Teddy sensed it immediately. He emitted a single, sharp bark, not one of aggression, but of alert. It was his way of communicating. "I'm here, boss. I've got your back." It's what he is trained to do. He grounds me. That one bark was all it took. Karen Jordan's front door burst open, and she marched onto her flawlessly manicured lawn like a general inspecting her troops. "Jack Dalton," she declared, her voice sharp enough to slice glass. "You are incapable of controlling that animal." I drew a slow breath, just as they teach you. In through the nose, out through the mouth. "He's a service dog, Karen." He was startled. "He is a menace," she proclaimed, her voice escalating to carry across the otherwise empty street. He is constantly barking, disturbing the peace of this community. This was a flagrant lie. Teddy was quieter than half the yapping purse dogs on our block. I informed her that he had barked once and began to walk away. But Karen was not finished. She now had an audience. A few neighbors were peering from their windows. She claimed her stage. "This is your final warning, Mr. Dalton. This community has standards." At that moment, a police car happened to cruise by on its regular patrol, and Karen's eyes lit up with a predatory glint. She flagged them down. "Officers," she cried out, her voice saturated with feigned panic. "Thank heavens you're here. This man's vicious animal just lunged at me." My blood turned to ice. The officers, Miller and Sanchez, exited their vehicle. They appeared weary. They were familiar with Karen and her histrionics. She launched into a dramatic narrative, depicting Teddy as a ravenous beast, straining at his leash, frothing at the mouth. All the while, he sat patiently by my leg, his tail giving a slow, hesitant thump against the pavement, his eyes asking, "What did I do wrong, Dad?" "Ma'am," Officer Miller said with a prolonged sigh, "it's a dog on a leash. He seems calm now." "Now," Karen shrieked, her voice reaching a piercing pitch. "He's only calm because you're here. He needs to be placed on the dangerous dog registry." That's when it occurred. While the officers exchanged a tired look, Karen took a step forward. She held a small canister in her hand, and before I could react, she aimed it at Teddy's face and sprayed. A dense, misty cloud shot out, striking him directly in the eyes. He yelped, a sound of pure pain and confusion that tore through my soul. He stumbled backward, shaking his head and pawing frantically at his face. I dropped to my knees beside him as the chemical odor, not pepper spray, but something bitter and sharp, like ammonia mixed with cheap perfume, assaulted my senses. My rage was a white-hot inferno. I stood and faced her. "What did you just do?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. The officers snapped to attention, their casual demeanor vanishing. "I was defending myself," Karen stated, holding up the canister. "It's just citronella spray. Perfectly harmless." Officer Sanchez, noticing Teddy's red and watering eyes, handed me a small saline bottle from his kit. "She just assaulted my service animal," I said, my voice as hard as steel. "In front of you." The officers took the canister as evidence, sealed it in a bag, and recorded our names. They instructed Karen to go inside and told me to take my dog home. They handled it like a playground squabble, but I recognized it as a declaration of war. The following morning, an animal control van arrived. The officer, a tired man named Ruiz, avoided my gaze as he stood on my porch. "We've received a report concerning your golden retriever," he said, focusing on his clipboard. The report, he elaborated, alleged that Teddy had bitten a child the previous day. It was a vicious, calculated fabrication. There had been no child. Ruiz explained they had a sworn statement from a witness who claimed the bite occurred just before the police arrived, which conveniently explained why they had seen nothing. The procedure was the procedure. A bite report involving a child necessitated a mandatory 10-day quarantine for Teddy. I could conduct it at home, but I was required to post a large, bright orange sign on my door, "Dangerous animal." That wasn't the worst of it. A formal hearing was scheduled, and the burden of proof rested on me to demonstrate that Teddy was not a danger. If the complaint was upheld, the standard order was humane euthanasia. Then came the final, devastating blow. Karen had filed for an emergency destruction order, citing a fabricated history of aggression. "An animal control supervisor will review the case file," Ruiz said, finally looking at me with a flicker of pity. "You have 24 hours to submit any evidence you have to the contrary. If you don't, and the order is signed, we'll be back Tomer." My home transformed into a prison, branded by the glaring orange sign. My first priority was securing evidence. Someone must have captured the incident on a doorbell camera. I began with my neighbors, but one by one, the doors were shut in my face. The Millers claimed their camera subscription had expired. Mrs. Gable, whom I knew had witnessed everything, wrung her hands and whispered, "Oh, I couldn't. I don't want any trouble." Karen, she's the head of the Architectural Review Committee. She was too afraid to risk a fine over her not-quite-to-code garden shed. My final hope was my neighbor, Duke. His camera had the perfect vantage point. Dalton, he grunted when he opened the door. Saw the sign. Nasty business. When I requested the video footage, he looked everywhere but at me. Don't know, he mumbled. Camera's been acting up. I glanced up. Its status light was a solid, mocking green. It was the most pathetic lie I had ever heard. My patience snapped. She got to you, didn't she, Duke? What did she promise you? He snarled. You stay out of my business. I saw that dog of yours. It's a beast. Good riddance, I say. He slammed the door in my face. I stood there, my hands clenched into fists, a feeling of absolute isolation washing over me. I had nothing. No witnesses, no video. The walls were closing in, and the clock was ticking louder than ever. With the walls pressing in and only 19 hours remaining on the clock, I made the only call I could. It was to a ghost from my past, my old army comrade, Marcus. He was a tech prodigy who now did things with cybersecurity that I couldn't even pronounce. After I explained the situation, the usual dry sarcasm in his voice disappeared. They are not killing your dog, Jack, he stated, his tone hardening. Not on my watch. What do you need? Intel, I replied. This whole thing is too well orchestrated. There has to be a paper trail. You want me to get into the Greenfield Meadows HOA server? I could hear the furious clicking of his keyboard. Their security looks like it was designed by a high school intern. Give me 30 minutes. Those were the longest 30 minutes of my life. Finally, my phone rang. I'm in, Marcus said, a tense excitement in his voice. Their password was Meadows 123. I'm insulted. But oh, it's a treasure trove, my friend. A cesspool of suburban tyranny. He began to read. The words painted a picture of a cold, premeditated conspiracy. An email from Karen to her assistant, Sarah, sent just 2 hours after the incident. Sarah, I need you to draft a complaint to animal control immediately. We will state that Dalton's golden retriever bit a child. Make the child anonymous, a visitor to the neighborhood, to avoid any need for actual records. We need to use the emergency protocol. I want that animal gone by the end of the week. My breath caught. There it was, in black and white. Marcus continued, detailing her emails to the board, in which she convinced them I was an unstable element driving down property values. The final piece was the witness. The sworn statement wasn't from a neighbor, it was from Sarah. Marcus found the email chain where Karen had bullied her into signing it, threatening her job. This was my wrecking ball. The issue was, it was a nuclear option, and admitting I had illegally hacked evidence would get the case dismissed and land Marcus in a world of trouble. That was a line I would not cross. The emails had to be the backup, the blackmail. My primary target had to be Sarah, the coerced witness. She was the weak link. My opportunity arrived in a moment of pure, heart-stopping chaos. I was in my front yard with Teddy when I saw Sarah at Karen's house. She was distracted by her phone while her small white dog, Alfie, trotted out of an open side gate and directly toward the street. A delivery van was approaching, its driver looking down at a package. There was no time to shout. Teddy, stay. I commanded and vaulted my low fence in one fluid motion. 3 long strides put me in the street, where I scooped up the little dog just as the van swerved, its tires screeching a foot from where I stood. Sarah finally registered what had happened, her face pale with horror. You saved him, she stammered, clutching Alfie. Why would you do that? She asked, tears welling in her eyes. After what I did. This was my opening. Because it wasn't the dog's fault, I said simply. And maybe it wasn't entirely yours either. The guilt she had been suppressing came pouring out. She called Karen a monster, explaining she had lied because she needed her job's insurance for her sick mother. I looked her directly in the eye. I have the emails, Sarah. I know she coerced you. I offered her a choice. Continue to live in fear, or tell the truth and help me stop her. She looked from my face to my house with its ugly orange sign, then down to the little dog still trembling in her arms. After a long moment, she took a deep, shuddering breath and nodded. Okay, she whispered. What do we do? The plan was audacious. The HOA had scheduled an emergency meeting for that evening in the community clubhouse, a public execution. I was going to give her one, just not the one she was anticipating. As evening approached, my internet went dead. I discovered the cable at the side of my house had been sliced clean. Of course, but my air support was already en route. Marcus arrived, followed by a quirky ham radio enthusiast named Marty, who, upon hearing the story, had volunteered his services. He quickly set up a battery-powered hotspot. "If things go dark," Marty said with a grin, "I'll make light." We walked into the clubhouse, a sterile room filled with about 30 residents. I saw the neighbors who had turned me away, their faces a mixture of guilt and fear. At the front sat Karen and her two bored cronies, her expression one of supreme confidence. Marcus took a seat in the back, casually placing his phone on the table in front of him, aimed directly at her. Karen banged a small gavel. "The first and only item on our agenda," she announced, "is the clear and present danger posed by the animal residing at 124 Willow Lane." She looked directly at me. "Mr. Dalton, your dog viciously attacked a child, and this board has voted to enforce all bylaws with fines and liens against your property." I stood up, my voice calm. "Excuse me, Miss Jordan. Before we discuss these sanctions, I'd like to discuss the incident you're referring to, the alleged dog bite." Her face tightened. "There is nothing to discuss. We have a sworn statement." "Do you?" I asked, my voice carrying through the silent room. "Because I'd love to know the name of this child who was bitten. Surely a police report was filed? A hospital visit?" The room began to murmur. Karen's story was starting to sound thin. "The family wishes to remain anonymous," she snapped. "They fear retaliation from you." "Retaliation?" I said with a humorless laugh. "I'm the one whose dog is scheduled to be killed in 15 hours. What I fear is a lie you created." "How dare you?" she shrieked, her composure cracking. "Are you calling me a liar?" "I am," I said, my voice like ice. "And I have proof." I nodded towards the back of the room. Sarah, who had slipped in unnoticed, stood up. She was trembling, but her eyes were defiant. All heads turned towards her. Karen's face went white. "Sarah," she stammered, "what are you doing?" "I'm telling the truth, Karen," Sarah said, her voice shaking but clear. "There was no child. There was no bite. I was there. Jack Dalton's dog did nothing." Karen Jordan sprayed the dog in the face, unprovoked. Then she ordered me to file a false report with animal control. She threatened my job if I refused. A collective gasp went through the room. Karen leaped to her feet. "She's lying. She's a disgruntled employee." But the dam had broken. Then Marcus stood up in the back. "And just so everyone is aware," he announced cheerfully, "this entire meeting is being live-streamed." Karen's face went blank. "We have about 500 viewers right now," Marcus continued, "including reporters from Channel 4 News. Maybe you'd like to repeat your accusations for them, Miss Jordan?" Karen looked at the phone in his hand, its small red light glowing like an executioner's signal. She looked at the faces of her neighbors, no longer fearful, but filled with contempt. She looked at me. The trap had sprung. Her face, a mask of righteous indignation moments before, crumbled into pure, unfiltered panic. Her reign was over. The instant Marcus announced the live stream, the clubhouse descended into chaos. Karen, her face a mask of pure, unfiltered panic, grabbed her binder and attempted to flee the stage. But Mrs. Gable, the very woman she had terrorized over a garden shed, stood up and blocked her path. It was a quiet act of rebellion that signaled the end. The meeting had transformed into a mutiny. The power dynamic had shifted completely. Before the pandemonium had even subsided, my phone, which had been silent for 2 days, began buzzing incessantly with calls and texts from local news reporters. Marcus's little broadcast had gone viral in our small city. The story was perfect for the 10 o'clock news, a decorated veteran and his service dog targeted by a power-mad HOA president. The court of public opinion delivered its verdict long before a real court ever could. The next morning, I awoke to a different world. The ugly orange quarantine sign was still affixed to my door, but it now felt like a relic of a battle already won. A news van was parked down the street, its antenna a silent testament to the previous night's drama. As I stepped outside, the change was palpable. Instead of glares and whispers, my neighbors offered hesitant waves and thumbs-ups. I saw my neighbor Duke on his hands and knees, scrubbing an oil stain on his driveway with a frantic energy, as if trying to wash away his own complicity. My first official call was from animal control. It wasn't a weary field officer this time, but a supervisor. Her voice was crisp, apologetic, and professional. "Mr. Dalton, we have received an affidavit from Sarah Peters recanting her original statement. In light of this new evidence, and frankly, the video of your HOA meeting, we are dropping all proceedings against your animal, Teddy. The quarantine is lifted, effective immediately. The emergency destruction order has been voided. We sincerely apologize for the distress this has caused." I felt a wave of relief, so powerful my knees went weak. I hung up the phone, walked over to the front door, and tore the orange sign in half. I knelt, wrapping my arms around Teddy, burying my face in his soft fur. "We won, buddy," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "We won." He just licked my face, his tail thumping a steady, happy rhythm against the floor. The war was over. The legal battle that ensued was swift and decisive. The HOA management company, scrambling to save face, called an emergency recall election, and the residents voted the entire board out, citing gross misconduct. They hired a local law firm to represent me pro bono, a clear public relations move to salvage their own reputation. We filed a suit against Karen Jordan personally and the now-defunct HOA board. We stood before a judge a few weeks later. The courtroom was quiet, but the air was electric. Karen's lawyer attempted to paint me as an unstable veteran and Sarah as a vengeful liar, but it was a pathetic defense against a mountain of undeniable evidence. When it was time for the judge to rule, she removed her glasses and looked directly at Karen. "Miss Jordan," she began, her voice as cold as a winter morning. "In my 15 years on this bench, I have rarely seen such a textbook case of malicious prosecution and neighborhood terrorism. You used your position of power not to build a community, but to enforce your will through fear." She turned to me. "Mr. Dalton, what you and your service animal endured is unconscionable. This court finds in your favor on all counts." The judgment was a hammer blow. The judge voided all fines and legal threats against me and awarded damages for emotional distress. But she didn't stop there. "Furthermore," she announced, her voice rising, "I am referring this case to the district attorney's office with a strong recommendation for criminal charges, including perjury and felony animal cruelty. You, Miss Jordan, have buried yourself in your own lies." The gavel came down with a final, resounding crack. Karen's downfall was as public as the meeting she had tried to use for my destruction. She sold her house at a loss and moved 2 states away to deal with the mountain of legal bills and public disgrace. Her name became a cautionary tale in our neighborhood. The old HOA was dissolved and a new one was formed, this time with a board that understood they served the community, not ruled it. Their first act was to issue a formal apology to me and make a sizable donation in Teddy's name to a local veteran service dog organization. Life settled back into a quiet rhythm, but it was a different kind of quiet now, not fragile, but earned. Sarah, who had become something of a local hero, found a new, better job, and we became unlikely friends. Even Duke came by one afternoon with a plate of cookies, mumbling that he'd been wrong and that Teddy was a heck of a dog. I accepted the cookies. I was done with grudges. A week later, the entire community gathered at the small park at the end of our block. The mayor was there. He spoke about courage, community, and standing up for what's right. Then he bent down and slipped a custom medal, the city's civilian service medal, over Teddy's neck. From the crowd, Marty lifted his walkie-talkie. "K8 MRT to base. Mission complete." Requesting belly rubs. Laughter broke the tension. Then the mayor pulled a cord, and a new wooden sign swung into view. The fresh carving read, "Teddy's Park." That evening, after the cameras had departed, we walked to his park. The light was soft. He sniffed the same trees and trotted the same loop, his tail held high. He hadn't changed, but the street had. I sat on a bench and watched him, the question from that dark day returning to me. How far will a man go to defend his own? As far as it takes, until the fight is won and home feels like home again. Teddy pressed against my leg and rested his head on my lap. We stayed there for a long time, just listening to the wind in the leaves of Teddy's park.